All right. Hi, Heidi. Hi, Sarah. I'm here with my two good friends and former colleagues, Heidi Erdman Sullivan and Sarah Nelson. Why don't we just do a couple of quick intros really fast, and then we'll get started talking about some ABM tactics and sales alignment and all of that stuff. Heidi, go first.
I was wondering if you're going to pick somebody. Okay. Great to be with you too. Heidi Erdman Sullivan, as Carey said, I am a marketing generalist with a strong technology marketing background, and the three of us knew each other at Constant Contact. And there I was doing some technology partner marketing. About 4 years ago, I started my own consultancy and now work with a lot of technology clients, also clients that help the workforce, either through employee benefits or HR type solutions, and absolutely love the work that I do. And then I also partner with a company called B2B Fusion on account-based marketing strategy, and particularly account plans and account research for our clients as well. So happy to share what I've learned along the way for sure, and to learn from the two of you as well.
Awesome. And Heidi has a beautiful background. She's at the lake this week. So thank you, Heidi, for joining.
Somebody else's place. Wish it was mine, but you know.
Sarah, over to you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Nelson. As these ladies mentioned, we've worked together for years back at Constant Contact. Since then, I've held a number of head of demand positions at largely SaaS-based technology companies. And recently, about 6 months ago, ventured off on my own to start my own demand generation consultancy. And I'm working largely with, like Heidi said, I have a group that I've been doing some work with called Demand Spring back in Boston. So just working with them on some client projects, and then on my own have some projects that I'm doing with clients to help really bridge the gap between their marketing and sales organizations, help with process and change management, and campaign marketing as well, just filling some gaps for larger clients who need to do more with less. So it's been fun so far.
I love it, Sarah. I'm so excited for you. Congratulations on making the leap. It's so exciting. So just a quick intro for myself. I'm Carey Thiels. I am the founder of CamCo Demand, which similar to Heidi and Sarah, which I know Heidi, I will brag on Heidi that she has been so influential in helping Sarah and myself take the leap into consulting and being a sounding board for us and a coach and a friend. So thanks to Heidi on that. But yeah, so I made the leap about year and a half ago, something like that. And the work I do is demand gen and ABM strategy and execution. I have partnered mostly, worked with cybersecurity or technology clients, SaaS-based companies. And that's where my sweet spot is. So the reason for what we're doing here today is really, I have been down in the weeds with some clients of mine, not only on the strategic side of things, but also tactically trying to put together account-based marketing programs. And I still have questions. And, you know, I've been in the game for 10 plus years now, and these ladies the same or more. And you know, if I still have questions, I figure other marketers do too. And so I thought, let's just share the knowledge and record it so that, you know, everybody can take advantage of what we're talking about and learning about from each other. So with that, I think Heidi and Sarah, you both told me a little bit about your experience with ABM, but I'd love to just know what's at the forefront of what you're working on with your clients right now. What are your biggest challenges when it comes to account-based marketing?
Heidi, do you want to take?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. And then I think I have a good segue based on your experience too, Sarah, with my experience with clients. So for me, it's a lot of teams are really struggling to do the fundamentals of learning about their accounts. So they can pick the accounts, maybe they have a process for tiering. A lot of companies don't yet. But if they have the accounts, then it's how do you dig in to understand those accounts, and how much time should you be spending on that kind of research? What should you be looking for? And then how do you compile that information? Because at the end of the day, if you're going to do, you know, let's say you pick 10 target accounts, you're starting out small, and you want to do a message that applies to all of them. Let's say they're all healthcare clients, what are the common trends across all 10, right? So that you're not necessarily stuck doing one-to-one marketing. How can you do one-to-many? So it's like, how do you dig in and do the research so that you can decide what the common messages should be, what the common pain points are, what personas within that, and then so that you don't kill yourself doing hyper customized marketing. You can do one-to-one for sure, and that's a great tactic. So for me, it's I've been really working, digging in and building account plans for companies and doing just crazy kooky internet research using whatever backdoor I can to find information about the contacts at companies, what their sales strategy is. So, I mean, at a high level, it's looking at, yes, press releases and news announcements, what the company website says, what they're saying on social. But for me, what's really been helpful is looking at the different contacts that you know are really hot, maybe based on previous conversations, and digging in and researching those specific contacts. Are they quoted in the press? Are they quoted in key industry publications? And if so, what are they saying? Because that can tell you about the company's strategy in a way that you wouldn't know otherwise, or it can give you some key points to put an account plan or some sort of template for sales, so that when they're having a conversation with Sally Jones, they know exactly what her pain points are. So for me, it's really the research, doing the basic work. Whose shoulders does it fall on? A lot of companies struggle with that too. Who's supposed to be doing the research? Well, it should be BDRs, but a lot of times they're young or inexperienced teams and don't take the time. So a lot of times it falls on marketing. I've seen it fall in knowledge management or sales enablement teams as well. So I think getting really clear on who's going to be doing the background research on these accounts and figuring out what does marketing need to know to be able to build the marketing campaigns, and what does sales need to be able to know to really tailor their message accordingly. And a lot of times with ABM, you got to step that research part up. It's hard because it's harder than you've ever done it before. So that's that. And then Sarah, I think what you and I have talked about a little bit in the past is one question we get a lot of times from clients is, when do I loop, if I'm planning ABM for the first time, let's say I'm embarking on a journey, when do I loop in my sales team? And how do I help them change? They're used to a lead generation or a demand generation cadence. How do I help them pivot over to an ABM cadence? I know, Sarah, you and I had talked about that a little bit.
So I have so many questions around account plans that I want to park. I'm like typing furiously because I want to park those and not like jump in. And so, yes. And then I also have written down here about like pivoting from a lead gen type of strategy, especially with sales concerned. So I think that's a really good segue. Sarah, if you have experience or want to comment on that, I'm all ears.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what Heidi just said. And the one thing that I'll add is like either companies haven't thought of it or they are. Like sales is inherently doing account-based work every day, right? They work an account, they get paid on an account. So a lot of times like you'll think, oh, we don't have this well defined, but like the sales work actually has like a really well a great definition of like, this is the profile of an account that we're after, right? Within the marketing org, there's that definition of maybe some of that info is being shared and there's alignment in terms of the account profiles. But the personas, like we're targeting so many different use cases within an account that there's like this department and that department. And it's just like a little bit of persona overload in terms of who are we actually trying to sell to. So I think it's either like, companies are afraid, especially for faster growing startups, to go too narrow and limit themselves. So moving away and pivoting from a lead gen strategy is scary because of that. You don't want to like limit your sphere of influence, or they're going kind of too broad, or just like randomly picking a list like, well, let's do like the Fortune 500 list. Like
all the time.
Everybody doing that. Like, why are you picking the list?
I want to go after Walmart.
Let's get ahead of the research and just pick a list. Yeah. And that like, then we're done. So like Heidi said, I think that the research is definitely influential, not just on the account level, but like, who are we talking to within the account? And how does our service look, or platform, or whatever you're selling, look different to this person versus this person over here in a totally different department, or even at a different level within the same department. But then I think that there's a lot of change management needed in terms of what is recommended to be able to effectively work those accounts. It's not just like cool, we've got a list, let's load it into the system, or worse,
Right.
not put it in a system like Salesforce or some other CRM and just like send a spreadsheet out. Like I've seen some just crazy things. Like we've got to just get the list of accounts out to the reps, and it's like, I get it. We need to generate revenue, but at the same time, you're just going to fall flat if you don't think about the proper way to build. You've got all of these funnel handoff points for an inbound lead gen funnel, and it's like very clearly orchestrated in terms of like, when is it marketing qualified? When has sales qualified it? And so it's like not a total departure from that. It's just rethinking like, okay, instead of an MQL, it's an MQA, but like, are the handoff points there? And does the team know what to do with their list of accounts? Like what does a fully exhausted account look like? Like, are we aligned in terms of the actual engagement tactics and what's available to the team to be able to go in and work these accounts, right? It looks different than I think a lot of the high volume inbound lead gen.
It does. Yeah, totally. So, and I think it's a fallback. The lead gen is always a fallback, right? That's what I'm experiencing currently, is that lead and demand generation, if you don't know what to do as an SDR or BDR, or the AEs aren't fielding those, any intent that's coming through, or they don't know how to work, do outbounding for account based yet, then they fall back to your lead gen model and they rely on those inbounds that are coming in. Do you find that too?
Yeah, I think it almost like an AE, sometimes they're better at selling new business versus nurturing existing accounts. Within BDRs, like there are some folks that just feel more comfortable hunting, and they're like, we hate MQLs. We just want to go like grab a cold contact from sales nav and I'm going to like do my thing. And it's like, it's not really about like who's sourcing the contact necessarily. To me, it's about intent at the end of the day, and how likely is somebody to like be in a buying cycle. And so whether it came in from a marketing webinar or you found it in sales nav, like ultimately what's going to convert faster, right?
Whereas I know, I'm so over first touch, it's not even funny.
I know. Yeah. So that piece of it, I think it's like, it's almost like the coaching needs to be there more for some people than others. If they're used to an inbound model and that's all they've been trained, how are we going to expect them to be successful if you don't give them any insights into the average number of touches they've got to have in an outbound cadence, or how to even set up or build that cadence? I do a lot of work actually building that stuff. And I, at first, early on in my career, was nervous to suggest anything because I always thought like, no one wants marketing writing their sales outreach, but like I've been a seller, I've managed SDRs, I've worked so closely with reps to help convert. At the end of the day, we're both in it to drive pipeline. And so it's a partnership, and there's awesome emails that I've seen the team create that like, it's not about who does it. Again, it's like a partnership. Let's create something great. And oftentimes I've been met with like a sigh of relief, like, oh, thank you. Like, this is great. So I think just coming to the table with that open mind of like, we've just got to get these key things done to be able to pivot as an organization. And it doesn't matter like who does what. Oftentimes it'll come from a variety of different places, but there are the key like operational and change management, like trainings that need to happen for the team to be successful, because they oftentimes are right out of college. And like you said, Carey, like, it's their first jobs. And so, and it's a hard job. It's one of the hardest, arguably, within any company. So you got to like help set them up for success.
Totally. And so Heidi, do you think that it comes from a bottom up approach or a top down approach, or somewhere in the middle, this change management? Like, can we make an impact as the marketing team going to our sales colleagues and kind of go from a bottom up level, or does it have to come from top down in large siloed, more, bigger sales orgs? What do you think?
I think you have to, where I would suggest you start as a marketing leader is getting in really tight, if you aren't already on ABM, with the sales leadership, like finding a really sharp, influential sales leader and having them definitely be the champion of it. And then in terms of where marketing can help, I really think the research part of it is powerful. Maybe I'm biased because that's what I enjoy doing. But I think if marketing can come to the table and say, hey, here's the expertise that you guys might not have time to dig up, but here's what we've learned from a little bit of cursory research and this is how you could potentially position and message. And in my experience, sales absolutely loves that part of it. And then also teaching them how to do it too is part of what I do with the account plans and the research, is teaching sales teams how to do it, but without spending the crazy amount of hours that I spend as a consultant to do it, teaching them how to do it in a quick, easy way. Little tips and tricks here and there. So I don't know if that answers your question, Carey. I mean, I think it's kind of a combo, but it's definitely, the alignment has to be there. The teams that I've seen do it best are really working closely together, and but also roles and responsibilities are clear too. I mean, marketing will do maybe some basic research and some basic, organization and strategy and stuff, but we can't spoon feed it to sales. Sales also has to be out there looking for these types of clues and signals and using demand-based and similar intent platforms. A lot of sales teams have questions around the intent platforms. What the heck are we supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say on this point is that the teams that I've seen do really well have actually waited to pull, when they've implemented something like demand-based for the first time, they've waited to intro it to sales until a little bit later, until they're kind of set up with their strategy, because sales inevitably has those, like, don't pull in sales potentially to use demand-based until you're ready to go with your campaigns, because they're watching it. They're like, all right, you guys aren't going to start these campaigns for another month. What am I supposed to be doing with demand-based in the meantime?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are other sales
uses
ahead
of time. Yeah.
So
that brings me actually two questions I have for you out of those comments. One is, can you give me some examples of the kinds of information? So I've actually, it's very timely of a conversation for us, because I've been digging into, like, searching the ends of the internet for account plans and how to put those together for, enterprise sales teams. And one of the things that I've noticed is that you can really boil the ocean. I mean, you can, in an account plan, you could have, people's blood types in there. Like there's,
yeah,
you could do,
it's like personas, the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So my question is, like, what are the key details that you found in your work that sales and marketing need to really build a cohesive marketing and sales execution plan?
Yeah, great question, Carey. The most valuable things that I think I put in account plans are, I actually build out a SWOT analysis at the top. So, and then that can pull in the insights that the teams, whether it's customer success with an existing customer you're trying to upsell, or that existing sales teams have had conversations. So they're going to know what the weaknesses are, what the strengths are, right? But then maybe marketing can layer on some of those opportunities and threats from some basic research. So I think something like a SWOT analysis, basically, I think you need something at the top of the darn thing to summarize everything.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I work into it is what I call the how we'll win reasons. So, because a lot of times you'll ask sales, well, what is the synergy with this account? Well, because they need our product, or because blah, 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 but there's no strategic tie-in with what's actually happening at the company. We know they're a technology company that's this size and they have this particular technology that ties in with ours. That's table stakes, but go beyond that and tell me what are the specific how or win reasons, because then that becomes your messaging and positioning also as a marketer. So, and the way that I'm cultivating those how will win reasons is doing that research, looking at what contacts are saying in key publications, looking at not just what comes up in Google or Google News feeds, but actually, like, for example, in retail, there's a publication called Retail Drive, and I think they have one for supply chain too. Like, there are these heavy industry publications. Pro tip: if you go into the search bar of these industry publications and type in a contact's name, you type in the company name, you're going to surface articles and quotations that you won't surface from a Google search because it's not showing up in the algorithm. Like, that's a good quick way to find stuff. So it's that SWOT analysis, or however you're summarizing what the key things are, the key synergies and opportunities. And then I think it's also like, how are we going to spear this account? What are the how will win reasons? And then from there, I also think going into surfacing for key contexts that you think are really influential in the buying cycle. Are there videos? Are there social media tidbits that you've pulled? when you really dig deep, that stuff I think is helpful. At the end of the day, I think sales in marketing needs to be able to, from the account plan, from that work, be able to give an elevator pitch or a boilerplate of why you'll win that specific account. And that's what I try to coach people on, is how much research do you have to do? How much digging? How comprehensive does your account plan need to be? Does it get to you to the point of being able to say in a 2 minute, minute and a half, how long is an elevator ride? I don't know, 30 seconds, being able to say that this is the key reason why this account needs our help.
That's so smart, Heidi. I'm so glad you boiled it up to that level for us, because it's easy to get overwhelmed. And I think sales does too, which is why I'm sure companies come to you for research. It's because they get overwhelmed. And I think in my experience, they also say, well, yeah, it's so easy for you, marketing, to dump this account plan on me. Like, I know what's going on with my accounts. I don't need to write it in your document. Like, I don't need to go do all of this stuff. But in reality, like, maybe they do have a lot of this in their heads, but it's not trickling down to their SDR and who's,
or
prospect.
Their ABM marketer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about, I agree with everything Heidi just said. And I think it's about thinking about, like, a lot of the way, and it sounds so, this is such a cliche thing, you both are going to hate me as soon as I say this, but like the way I explain to sales or BDR leaders that I'm like partnering with, I agree with what Heidi said, that it's more top down in terms of the alignment. There's the bottom up, like you're never going to find a sales org that's like, no, don't stop sending us leads and like, let's not pivot to an ABM model. They're going to be like, yeah, like that's what we're doing today. Like, thank you for getting on our page. But it's about having the buy-in at the top around like the math, like the math behind the universe of accounts you're targeting and how it's all going to work. Your pipeline targets at the end of the day. So as long as those leaders are in alignment, then it's okay for a marketer to be like, oh, I'm not just going to keep doing what I'm doing to just fill the funnel with like leads because I have a volume goal. Like their goals change, right? So I think that is critical. But then when you start to implement, it's the research and the getting it on paper, because it's a team sport. Like that is the simplest way to put it. Like we're all in this together now. We've agreed that these are the accounts, but it can't just be in your head. So I love what Heidi's, like what you're suggesting, Karen, getting that out of their head and onto paper. And then what Heidi's saying in terms of augmenting with some additional research that maybe the team is doing now, but more on a spot, like case by case basis. Like let's do it at a macro and then kind of prioritize our list based on, I think, some of the simple things to look at too that we haven't talked about yet are like, have they bought from us already? Has this account bought from us already? If so, what was the product that they purchased? Are there other natural upsell opportunities based on what they've already bought? Taking the research that Heidi just mentioned and thinking about, okay, based on like mental checklists that a seller will go through. Again, usually this is not like rocket science, but it's alignment and making sure like if there's difference in strategy, we're on the same page around like, well, how does this rep think about their territory of accounts and what does this rep look for? And like identifying some of the trends in terms of like, when do we know that we're ripe for the picking in terms of positioning this product versus this product? Or if you have a platform, like which is the right department to sell into first? And that stuff is like, usually you have a lot of existing data that shows you, okay, we tend to do well with this industry selling this product first. Like if you have any data like that show like from past opportunities, even if they're close lost, just what kind of propensity have you been creating opportunities within this, like if you slice it by industry or by persona, like that's the most helpful thing to figure out, okay, where are we going to go from here? Because if you just look at, here's what we have, here are the accounts that haven't bought from us, and then like there's all this opportunity within, it can be overwhelming. And it's almost like, yeah, I'm working on it, but like, what specifically are we working on? It's
interesting that you say that, Sarah, because right now, one of the things that I'm working on with one of my clients is, well, we've got sales who's coming up with a list over here. Q3 is coming up. We've got our target account list for the next 90 days. There's coming out of sales, and each AE is responsible for, sourcing 20 accounts. They're going to take 5, and then maybe their SDRs will take the other 15. Okay, that's fine. But then from a marketing perspective, we have all this great technology and we have insights and tons of data. And we might have a BI team or an ops team that can pull all this data together about what are the accounts that have a high propensity to buy, and what do we combine that with our ICP? And then we have this list of gold, that we can look at and say, okay, sales, maybe you want to think about this propensity list, but I think that there's a gap and we're not quite putting it together. Like sales is still going to have their target account list, and then marketing's going to do all our marketing campaigns to this other high propensity to buy list.
Yeah.
Like, where does it meet in the middle, and how do you orchestrate that coming together?
It is hard. And that's, so one of the clients I'm working with right now, actually, this is an example of, I think, senior leadership being instrumental in terms of driving the alignment forward, not having to be in the weeds necessarily, but asking, a client I'm working with, we got together to talk about, okay, here's a campaign plan. The sales team has a focus to drive more customer expansion. So this is specifically ABM within existing customer accounts. And then the customer success team is on the hook as well. So like everybody's being asked to drive more growth within existing customer accounts. Cool. You would think that's all we need. We're aligned, right? But no, when we actually started to look at the Salesforce report of existing or active use cases versus different use cases that we have as potential, there was a long list. And I think what you're referencing, Carey, is where is the alignment in terms of how can marketing help support you, right? And that's where I think I personally have fallen down before, because it sounds easy, like the list is done, we're aligned on who we're targeting, maybe there's multiple personas, and the account team knows their plan, but the marketing team doesn't, right? So there's misalignment, and maybe we're planning events that are focused more on this C-level persona, and they're seeing more success with the director, or whatever the case is.
You would think this doesn't happen, Sarah, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's
so
crazy.
If there's not that alignment on like, what are the priority personas and priority use cases, and like, that's all we're going to focus on, and like be okay with that, right? Like, not saying don't go and do an in-person lunch and learn, or we can't enable different types of activities that can be seller led, BDR led, even an ABM marketer. If we have more of that one-to-one model, sure, but oftentimes you don't. You're kind of a lot of companies are starting with a pilot and not investing all of their marketing resources in ABM. So you've got to figure out how to make the most of the extra awareness and advertising. And I always say to sales, it's not like I'm delusional. I don't think someone's going to see an ad and click it and buy from the ad. Like, oh, I need
no, of course
technology to do X. Like, let me click.
Isn't there a stat out there right now that it's like 11 times you need like 11 touch points to even have an awareness?
Answer the email that the BDR is sending. So, but it needs to be aligned. Like, we can't be disjointed with the messaging and the awareness that we're driving as an org. So that piece of it sounds like easy, like the sales team knows. So let's just move, like get them the list.
I feel like it's the hardest part of our jobs.
The
alignment piece to me is the hardest part.
Yeah, it is. So having leaders who force it, like, hey, we're getting together before you guys kick off. I want to know what are the top 3 priorities, and like asking everybody on the call, so you all agree with this. It's so helpful, because it's like, all right, it sounds so obvious, but it's sometimes no, they don't agree. So like, we got to go back to the drawing board and tweak something.
Totally.
And building off of what Sarah said, I mean, I've seen a couple of really cool sales leaders who literally said, we need to focus. We are focusing on these target accounts. Okay, it's tough when you're doing demand gen and you're doing ABM at the same time, right? You've got 2 different motions. But these leaders, both of them respectively, really said, we're focusing on these named accounts. We're not swapping one out for the other unless we discover something really instrumental.
For a certain period of time, right?
Right. For a certain period of time. And I'm talking about pilots. I mean, that's typically where I come in versus somebody who's been doing ABM for a while. But I think having that sales leadership is really, really key to being able to give marketing some air cover and help the collaboration go a little more smoothly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So Sarah, you said something too that I want to get both your thoughts on. I feel like there is a struggle to pin down marketing, and especially demand gen teams, right, are always tasked with net new pipeline, net new business. But there's an existing base that usually the companies that I'm working with have multiple products, and there's a cross-sell opportunity or an upsell opportunity. And a lot of times there's a misalignment between a demand gen team's goals and the fact that you've got all of these existing expansion opportunities that you could be going after that actually lend themselves much better to account-based marketing than a net new approach would. How have you guys been able to bridge that gap? Or have you?
It's a good question. And I think it fundamentally comes down to what that leadership team is like when they go and present to the board. What are the metrics that they're on the hook for? Because a lot of times if they are just trying to demonstrate to the board that they can grow new logo acquisition and increase that from X to X, right? Like they're going to want their marketing team more focused on net new acquisition, because that's an investment in the growth of the business, right? Like I think of the marketing team as a growth lever that you can pull to try to get to that goal faster. It's not that we couldn't generate pipeline faster within a different set of accounts, but I think a lot of times what I've seen is there's a belief that, well, we have a CS organization and that's their role, right? And so we don't need marketing to focus on this. Now I don't agree with that. I think like a lot of time that you can be more efficient and a lot more effective with growing pipeline faster if you have a team. But I think it boils down to like, what are the key metrics that senior leadership team is being held accountable to by the board? In this case, the client I was just referencing has a really stellar rate of growth within their existing customer client base. And that's something that they kind of look at quarter over quarter when they have board meetings. And anytime there's something that like slows down there, it's like, all right, well, we need to like put a concerted effort behind picking that metric back up. So I think it does depend a lot on like, what are those key metrics that are being looked at under a magnifying glass almost.
Yeah, totally. Heidi, any thoughts on that?
I think helping customer success via an ABM method is something that it could be overlooked. And I haven't seen a lot of clients doing it. I think I've only had one out of the clients that I've worked with that wanted to look in and apply that for existing customers. And there's so much rich information there that marketing can leverage. It depends. I think Sarah said before, it depends on how good your customer success team is. What is their current, do they have a 98% renewal rate? And then what are the numbers associated with that, right? Are they upselling appropriately? So but I think Sarah, you made an excellent point about it. Yeah, what does the board want? Because that's going to be ultimately the marching orders. So that's a good probably thing to think about first, and then work backwards from there as to whether that could be something potential for your company.
Yeah. And it's a good point, Heidi, too. I think like if the metric's important, is the team that we're thinking is doing it actually able to do it, right? Like, do they have the resources or the bandwidth to actually focus on both onboarding new customers and helping drive upselling growth, or do they not? In which case, like a lot of times it's like in theory, that should work great, but in practice, is it actually working? That's something for companies, I think, to think about, because it's low hanging fruit when it comes to especially tough economic times, like little thing called potential recession that is like in the news right now. And I think it's something that's important to talk about, because the companies that actually do spend time thinking about how can we be more efficient with the pipeline that we create is going to come out stronger on the other side of any kind of economic downturn. So it might just be as simple as structuring the team or dedicating a couple of folks on the team to start thinking more about customer expansion and growth.
And I will say on that point with the research part, and this can apply to new accounts, new logos too, right? But the key things that I look for when I'm doing research on existing customers is, what is the company doing at strategic level? What are they saying in their annual reports about potential spending or spending cuts? Are they talking about mergers and acquisitions? Any kind of signals that you can tap into there will help you see where the budget is, and then look and see who's making those comments. and who maybe are they teeing up. Sometimes you can even discern like who is being teed up to lead these acquisitions, or there was just an acquisition and who's the team that was responsible for that, because that's going to be so like there's some cool things that you can do there in terms of seeing, is there an expansion opportunity at an existing customer, that customer success or a salesperson, if they're wearing both a hunter and a farmer hat, haven't thought of yet.
Yeah, that's such a great point.
Have such a wealth of information. The two of you, my head is reeling with so many more questions. So,
well, you asked such good questions.
Well, thanks. One thing I wanted to ask you about is going back to this notion, Sarah, you mentioned it earlier about how lead gen or demand gen teams have their full day job. You know, they're responsible for driving demand and pulling in leads to feed their sales teams. And a lot of times account-based is sort of your augmented strategy on top of your lead gen strategy, right? Marketers are getting hungry. They want to, you know, start diving into account-based. How do you pilot? I know both of you have such good experience with pilots. What would you say is the best way to pilot account-based? And I'm thinking like, is it one-to-many? Is it, which I think is kind of just glorified lead gen? And then, or is it one-to-one, or is it somewhere in between in a one-to-few kind of a strategy? What have you seen work?
It's a really good question. And I think I don't want to avoid the question by saying it's situational, but I do think situational, kind of depending on the like, what is the end goal that we're after in terms of pipeline? How many opportunities would we need to create to be able to source that pipeline? Like, what's the average deal size of that company? So it kind of depends on like how enterprise are we talking? When we talk ABM, I always think more of an enterprise model, but like how enterprise is the company? If not very enterprise, like it's going to look more like one-to-many. But the good news is it's more targeted than what we were doing before and a lot more efficient. And it is still spear fishing. We're just going after a bigger pool of fish. My analogy.
Bigger ocean, bigger kettle of fish. What is that?
Yes, we're casting a net in a bigger pond. But then on the flip side, you know, if it is true enterprise marketing, like I think it's okay to go with, I would hesitate to do a one-to-one very early on in a pilot, because there are so many situational things. Like we think about marketing as being measured up until pipeline creation, and then we kind of lose control over what's happening within an org that may change their ability to buy now, right? Like the person leaves the company. Like there are things that just happen that blow up a sales deal. So if you put all your eggs in one basket in a pilot that you need to demonstrate success with, like I think that's an obvious reason to kind of talk to the sales team about how can we maybe dial it into like a one-to-few, where you pick whether it's honing the events based on like where you have saturation of customers, like what cities are we going to host events in, or what industries are we really going to focus on? Or everyone picks their top 2 accounts. Maybe there's a profile and there's 50 accounts. Great. Now everybody pick 1 or 2 and let's focus in on that. But like, yeah, I think it kind of depends on the average deal size of the company that you're working for. When you think about, is it more one-to-many, or do we really need to get narrow and focus on, you know, less than 10 accounts?
Okay. Heidi, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right what Sarah said. I usually recommend that companies only focus on, let's say, 2 or 3 in a pilot to start. I would be curious to hear what you guys think about that. And again, it's it depends, right? How big is your lake? How many fish? But it's because you're going to be getting you're greasing the wheels for the first time. You need to get a motion done and get it really tight, figuring out how things work, and then you can expand it to future accounts. So I usually say to clients, if you can, focus on 2 to 3 only to start for a pilot. And I also think it's really smart to focus on one industry specifically. Of course, that gets political. If the sales team, you have a retail sales team, and you have a healthcare sales team, and you have a government sales team, and they all want this ABM attention, that's really hard. But I do think if you're going to do the legwork of doing the research, looking at all the accounts, if you can do it with one specific industry in mind, I think then you can build a really sharp campaign for one specific industry. So those are really my tips is start
So
small
like
if you
one-to-one,
can.
Heidi, like a couple of one-to-one pilots.
Either one-to-one or even like a smaller version of one to many, right? Across 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of, in my experience, it's just a lot of work, and it's a lot of things to get in a row. Now, some organizations might poo-poo that and say, we don't have time. Our sales goals are too big. We need to go larger.
Yeah.
And so, but then I think where Sarah said, I think Sarah, you said about 10, maybe accounts.
Yeah, I like the
mouth.
idea of having one to two, and I really like the idea of focused on one industry, because as you start to get into kind of building those messaging hierarchies, like what are we saying at every stage of the funnel? What are the products we're backing into? How are we positioning them? Like that changes sometimes from industry to industry. But yeah, I do think having 1 or 2 key accounts of focus, like for each rep, and I don't know how many reps are involved in the pilot. Sometimes it's all, sometimes it's not, but if it's more than like 20 accounts, I think we're starting to encroach into that like one-to-many territory, and it's harder to get a lot more custom with regards to, okay, BDR, sales team, like as you build a RACI, like you could still maybe do some of the stuff that's a little bit more personal that Heidi's mentioning for like 1 or 2 accounts across maybe 10, but like task the BDR with here's
tier them, kind of like your top tier, and then
yeah, not to say the rest the team doesn't chase, but like these are the ones that are going to get treated differently and with extra attention and support from marketing to help tell that story, to see if we can drive them through the funnel faster and kind of look at deal velocity.
Yeah.
And Carey, I think to your point of it's always a difficult decision of which one of those 3 options do you go with, the one-to-one, one-to-few, or one-to-many. I would also encourage people to take a look at what you have for existing campaigns and collateral, and start with something where you have stuff already, so you don't feel like you have to create stuff. That's low-hanging fruit. And then it's, can you get some technology in place to help you customize certain fields and beyond your email?
Heidi, that may have been like the best advice I think that we've talked about so far, because oftentimes it's like, yes, we talked a little bit about customer expansion being low-hanging fruit, but the actual, like, where do we already have a lot of collateral that we can use? Because that's one of the biggest areas where I've seen like teams fall down, or where I have fallen down. It's like, yeah, that sounds great. And I say yes, because I just want to agree and move forward. And then it's like, oh shit, 0 content targeting,
slows everything down.
So then you're like, oh God, now we have to version everything. And it's like your launch dates kind of get pushed back. And like, you need to hit the ground running day 1 with like the enablement kits and like getting your ads launched. And so you kind of have to pick based on where you've built some content, or maybe seen some success at a persona level before.
I think it's that mindset of realizing, if you're piloting it, knowing that ABM is not impossible, it's totally doable, but it's that it's a new motion, and the things that you think wouldn't take a lot of time might take you a lot of time. So how can you be scrappy about it? And your sales leadership may say, well, we're going into retail. We have big goals around retail or healthcare, and we need to focus on that, not this other industry that we're already penetrated in. I mean, those are conversations you have to have. But how can you get scrappy and just save yourself some time, and also budget too, right? Or time, the resources, human resources too, of people needing to take the time to build stuff.
Yeah.
Ladies, I don't know how we're at the top of the hour already. Like, it's gone by so fast. What parting words would you have for somebody who is, looking for any advice or any like quick wins, or how to start their journey into ABM tactics and not just the strategic level? What advice would you have for them?
Sarah, you want to go first?
Yeah.
Or maybe that was mean. I can go first.
No, I'm happy to. I think just having go into it with an open mind, right? Like, don't have this. I tell myself this all the time too. I'm like, I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen some good and some weird and some bad stuff before, but don't let that kind of influence how you think about approaching something, like everything that you're creating, even though it sounds like everything is like, we talk one-to-one, one-to-many, one-to-few, there's all these buzzwords and it all sounds the same. Like every situation is so different. And so like to Heidi's point about retail, like maybe that's a big focus for the company. Cool, great. But like, if this is a new motion, maybe we all agree that this is something we're going to test in this sphere and like figure out all the kinks, and then, you know, create a milestone. Like, let's start creating the content and we launch retail on this date. It's not a, like, we can only do one. It's kind of an evolution. That would be my other tip. So open mind, it's an evolution, and there's going to be many changes along the way. And so there's opportunity to do maybe some of what a few different people want, but it's about focus and agreement on how we get there.
Yeah.
I would say always apply the "is it scrappy" test. Are we being scrappy enough test? Like, ask yourself that question along the way. Is there a way we could do this easier? Because you're going to be, if you're talking pilots, right? The other thing is, I think, telling leadership, because oftentimes we don't have this conversation as marketers. I know in the past as a leader, I always wanted to do everything myself and I wanted to do everything. But it's being able to tell leadership, look, I need air cover on this. I need to just be able to run a pilot with X accounts. I need these resources, or I need to be that way. And then the other thing that I forgot to mention along the research side of things, it's also with account plans, anything that you can do to standardize it and get it in Salesforce. That's part of what we've been doing with ABM Fusion. They do a lot more than that, but getting some sort of custom field in Salesforce for your account plan. There are also tools out there, like I'm starting to dig into people.ai is one that a client's using that supposedly builds account plans for you. I can't speak to that too much. I do think that you need to add the human layer, not just because I sell this and that's how I make money, but you do need to add, I think you need to take information from people AI or any of these AI technologies, and it needs to have a human lens on it of what is your sales team good at? What is your company message? What are really the hand in glove synergies between this account and your company? Because I just don't think there is any technology out there, maybe I'll be surprised, but that could really spit that out perfectly.
I agree, because it's about a connective tissue, right? Like that a technology would be really hard to build and say, oh, like we know, maybe where you've done well as a company before, but like, do we know what your content audit looks like for that? Like there's so many moving pieces. And so a lot of it is connective tissue.
So
and
ask colleagues
you
too. Yeah, you, Carey.
My biggest do-over is thinking about ABM as I have to get it right the first time. Similar to what you were saying, Sarah, is like there's so much pressure, whether you're in startup, Series B or Series F or whatever it might be, or these large enterprise companies. Like ABM is, I won't say never, but in my experience, like it's trial and error. It's figuring out the right way, a sequence of things and the right way to align with sales. And I personally put so much pressure on the pilot, let's figure out what we can learn from ABM right now and make it a success right now. And this one, we only have one shot at it. And that to me is not the way to do ABM, because if you do it like that, it's inevitably going to fail because you're learning, and it's a big initiative, that you have to tackle in phases and learn things and then iterate. So
exactly.
I think that's my biggest do-over is like, it's not a one-time thing. It's, I'm going to tackle this initiative and keep growing throughout years, So.
Yeah, I'm taking so much away from everything you're both saying. I'm like, what you just said, Carey, and then what Heidi said about like asking for, or like setting expectations with leadership. It's like, going to be at least 6 months before because you're testing things that, like, if you have a long sales cycle, it's going to take 6 months for us to determine, is our velocity increasing? Is our average deal size increasing? Like, and so it doesn't have to be overnight success, to your point. Right. Like it's about testing and trying until you can fine tune, but also, giving it enough time to be able to see the outcome, and is it actually, are we driving what we, not just pipeline creation, but are we closing bigger deals as a result of us focusing
totally. And that takes time. I mean, enterprise sales is not short, it's long, it's year-long plus sales cycles. And so you know, a lot of marketers are under this pressure of saying like, we have to deliver KPIs right now because leads are so fast.
Quarter
So
over quarter growth.
we've all been tasked with lead gen, and we're all used to that month over month or quarter over quarter quota, our goal, and ABM doesn't lend
partner from that. Yeah.
So.
And I'd also say you don't have to exist in a silo either. I think a lot of times us marketers don't reach out enough to contemporaries. So find a colleague or former colleague or somebody on LinkedIn, or even us. I think any of us would be happy without any sales pitch involved to talk to people about and have this kind of conversation separately. But find some people who have done it. And there are lots of people, the three of us know that there are lots of people in the B2B community that are happy to share their expertise. And so don't be afraid to ask for help along the way too.
Yeah.
100%.
Yep.
Well, Sarah, Heidi, thank you so much for the time. I'm gonna just for you guys, I'm gonna stop recording and then we'll chat. But for everybody else, thank you so much for giving our thoughts and feedback on ABM a listen here. And if you have any questions, reach out to us. We're all friendly and open to any questions. All right. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Carey.
Thank you.